We have not been able to add any base acres on ground that is farmed since the 1980s, right? So we have been stuck with the same amount of base acres as what was happening back then. And the simple fact of it comes down to a lot of these farm program payments are based off of what you have base acres in, not what you're planting, but how many base acres you have and what it is enrolled in.
Base acres drive federal commodity program payments, but on many farms that number hasn't been updated in years. That's changing. Find out how right now on Nebraska FARMcast. From the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, this is Nebraska FARMcast. I'm Ryan Evans. Most federal commodity program payments aren't based on what you plant this year. Rather, they're based on base acres, a number that's assigned to your farm that may not have changed in years or even decades. But new federal farm legislation gives landowners the chance to add base acres starting this year. To tell us about those changes, I am really glad to welcome back Anastasia Meyer, who is an extension educator here at Nebraska who serves as the extension ag economist for the southeastern part of the state with the Center for Agricultural Profitability, and she's written a new article about the new base acre allocation and requirements surrounding that. And that's available in the notes to this podcast and on our website at cap.unl.edu. Anastasia, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
We'll get into specifics, but can you just start by explaining why this provision, which was in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, why it exists and what it's trying to fix?
Yeah. So what it's trying to fix is the fact that we have not been able to add any base acres on ground that is farmed since the 1980s, right? So we have been stuck with the same amount of base acres as what was happening back then. And the simple fact of it comes down to a lot of these farm program payments are based off of what you have base acres in, not what you're planting, but how many base acres you have and what it is enrolled in. So this is what's exciting about this One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And landowners are starting to see these postcards come in the mail from the Farm Service Agency saying, hey, you can now review it starting June 1.
And can you walk through how those base acres are established on a farm, and then maybe answer why a farm might have fewer base acres than it has just pure cropland acres?
Yeah. So what is a base acre, right? And how did we get it established? Base acres were established in the 1985 Farm Bill. So if the producer who was farming it signed up for the 1985 Farm Bill, congratulations, you got base acres. So if you're farming a piece of ground that maybe was not enrolled in, or it was pasture and now you actually farm it, you don't have any base acres on that field because it was not signed up for in the 1985 Farm Bill. And in the 1985 Farm Bill, what you planted is what those base acres were established in. And then in 2014, we had the chance to do some reallocation of base acres, which means that we were able to say that in my area that we farm in, we had a lot of base acres in in wheat and milo, grain sorghum, and not in corn and soybeans, because that's what they planted back in 1985. So you were able to reallocate if you wanted to or not. We were able to update yields. Most people did update yields. And then in 2018, we had the chance to update yields again. Not a lot of people could, though. So this is why this change is so exciting for people who are now farming a lot more acres than what they currently have base acres in.
And again, we encourage readers to check out your article. It's in the notes to this podcast and on our site at cap.unl.edu. And you mentioned the eligibility calculation for the base acres uses a 5-year average of planted and prevented planted acres. Can you clarify which years that average covers under the legislation and how prevented planted acres are treated in that calculation?
So the really great thing about this is there's not a lot of calculations or really anything to do for producers or landowners to look at. Essentially, what they're going to look at is what you planted or what your producer planted from 2019 to 2023, and they're going to compare it to your 2024 base acres. If you have more acres planted or prevent plant certified at the FSA than what you currently have base acres in, you're going to be able to increase them. It's a simple form. A lot of the postcards that are getting sent out is just for your information, right? You can opt out of adding base acres, but I don't know why any landowner or producer truly would. So yes, it's going to look at 2019 to 23. They're going to see, are you eligible or not? And then we get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty details, right? There is a cap. So we're not going to see a one-to-one addition most likely. So by saying that, if I farm 100 acres, I plant 100 acres and I only have 40 base acres, I'm probably not going to be able to get up to 100. But I'm probably going to be able to get some more. I don't know the certain percentage yet. I don't even think FSA knows that yet.
And that's a nationwide cap of 30 million new base acres. Is that a concern for people who are interested in this?
No, I don't think it should be of any concern, right? I think if people are opting out of it, potentially we could get maybe more than what we're seeing at the FSA office, because the FSA looked at, these are potentially what you could increase to. And if people opt out, we would have additional that we could go up to. But I think the important thing to just remember is this increase in base acres is going to be a prorated amount. It's not going to be a one-to-one addition. Unfortunately, that's not how it's going to work.
Yeah, thank you. And you mentioned in the article that when FSA is assigning new base acres to a crop that has no established farm yield, it might use a county average yield instead. So is that typically going to be a better or worse outcome for a producer or landowner?
Well, it depends, right? That's a big question. Are you an average producer that is probably about the same as the county yield? Are you an amazing producer? Because then that's going to hurt you if the county average is actually lower than yours, or if you are subpar, it's great. But really, let's remember that the yield is only going to be important if you were enrolled in price loss coverage and PLC. And then this whole yield thing is a little bit interesting, right? Because I mentioned the fact that in 2014 we had the chance to reallocate our base acres. So if you reallocated and if your base right now is currently what you plant, you're just probably going to see that yield swept into that new base acre. So if you plant a corn and soybean rotation, and that's what your base acres are, there's probably not any concern for you. But let's again talk into my area. We saw a lot of producers here keep their grain, sorghum, and wheat base acres because at the time, remember, we were signing up for a 5-year farm bill. And at that time, those were paying pretty good. So they decided to keep it. Now, if you're adding new base based off of what you've been planting the last 5 years, you're probably going to be seeing corn and soybean base acres added on to your farm that you already have wheat and grain sorghum. So what yields do you use if you don't have any of that already associated to that farm number? These are when you're going to see those county average yields. So I don't know if it's going to truly affect a lot of people, but I do know that it is going to affect some that maybe chose to keep their old base and not reallocate to the new base.
And maybe if that's what is really important to somebody, they really just want to right now be able to reallocate existing base acres or update program yield. They can't do that right now, as you mentioned,
Nope.
under this provision. So how then should they maybe think about this provision and getting new base acres?
Yeah, so remember, this is only adding new base. We cannot touch any of our old base. We cannot reallocate it to what we currently plant. We cannot increase our yield. We can't do any of that. And remember, this is what they are basing the Ark County and the price loss coverage payments on, right? What your base is enrolled on, not what you're currently planting. So again, yield is only going to matter for those price loss coverage base acres that are enrolled in it. And it's only Ark County is going to be using the county average yield. And so really yield's not going to affect that at all. It's just kind of what's on paper at FSA. So I wouldn't get too concerned about it. I've kind of been telling people there isn't anything to it but to do it, right? I don't see why you would opt out of it, especially when we don't know what future legislation is going to base any farm payments on, right? Right now, we've been seeing a lot of these ad hoc payments. So the ECAP and just a lot of payments that are based off of what you truly plant, not what your base acres are in. So if we go more towards that in the future, this means nothing. But if we stick with this whole method of giving payments based off of what your base acres are in, this is when we really want to increase them while we can, because we might have the chance to reallocate again in the future or update yields again in the future.
Do you have advice for situations when you might have an operator and a landowner working together, but they might have different ideas about whether to pursue additional base acres? I know you mentioned a couple of times, why not do this, right?
Yeah. So remember, ultimately, this is going to be a landowner's decision, right? Because that base acre is tied to the land, to the farm number at FSA. So if you're no longer farming it, you can't pick up these base acres and take with you, right? There's going to stick with the ground. So make sure that you're talking to your landowners, and make sure the landowners are also talking to your producers. Understand that, hey, this potentially might help them, or it might just be a status quo, right? That's something that's really hard to explain to, especially absentee landowners, that this might help us, but it might not. It depends. Am I enrolled in the right program? Does it trigger a payment that year? There's all of these things that got to fall into line. But again, when are we going to have the chance to do it? So this is why landowners and producers need to work together on this decision and make sure that, it's not being left on the table. What I have gathered is it's going to be automatic almost at FSA, but you do have the option to opt out of it.
Thanks. And last question for you is more of a practical nature. What is the information? What kind of things do people need to gather or prepare before they contact or go to their FSA office?
Nothing.
Easy.
FSA is already going to have all of your planting history, what you have certified from 2019 to 2023. They're going to have it calculated already. And so you can kind of just see how it adjusts. The big thing is, I think a lot of landowners, they're getting these postcards and they're kind of like, what does this mean? Is this something I should do? And they're just unaware. So just have that conversation. There's not a lot of really calculations or any of that. You don't need to gather it. You just need to take the time to actually see what increases and have that conversation with the other party. That this is happening and this is why we want to do it. This is why we don't want to opt out of it.
Great. And certainly we encourage producers and landowners to reach out to their local FSA office for information on this opportunity. And I really want to thank Anastasia Meyer, who is an extension educator, agricultural economist with the Center for Agricultural Profitability at Nebraska. And again, encourage you to check out her new article in the notes to this podcast exploring this issue. And it's on our website as well at cap.unl.edu. Thanks a lot, Anastasia.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for listening to Nebraska FARMcast, a production of the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I'm Ryan Evans, and you can find a host of farm and ranch management resources, including articles, decision tools, videos, and more on the Center for Agricultural Profitability's website, cap.unl.edu.